still at it when I click on those. Hello, this is Alice Wheaton. I think my voice was audible there just a bit before the visual, but if that's so, forgive me. I didn't say anything very interesting at all. I want to thank you for being with me today. We're going to talk about leadership weaknesses, and typically we don't see a whole lot of books that are all about weaknesses that leadership suffer from. And I think that there might even be a whole lot of leaders that know they have some weaknesses and are probably afraid to admit them. So I'm going to talk about the 4 or 5 most common weaknesses that show up. A weakness, you know, is simply a strength that's been taken to the extreme. And so one of the things that happens oftentimes, especially for supervisors, I find that young supervisors are often just thrown into a job. They need the supervisor quits, and then they take someone from the floor and they say, okay, you're in charge now, you're the supervisor. But without any training, the poor guy or poor gal has not even been preparing. It's not typically for that job. They haven't been taking courses, they haven't been reading books, but one day they're taken by the hand or the shoulders and said, here, now you're the supervisor. You know, when I was a nurse, I was working in a really rural area, and someone had tried in the community had tried to commit suicide by shooting themselves up through their mouth. And that's how I got introduced to intensive care. I was brand new graduate working in this rural hospital, and the nurse head nurse just couldn't deal with it. She started to throw up, and so as she was leaving the room to go and throw up, she grabbed me by the shoulder and says, okay, you're his nurse, and she shoved me in there. I had no idea how to take care, out of suction, how to take care of airways or anything, but I was desperate to keep that person alive, and so I learned. And, you know, I'm sure I made mistakes along the way. That's typically how supervisors and new managers learn, is by doing. And yes, that's okay, but it's much better to be able to be an apprentice, like in the olden days, where people apprenticed for 2 or 3 years to be an accountant or to be a technician, a plumber, an electrician, and so on. And then now, of course, people go to school for that, and they still spend some time apprenticing, but not as much. The lack of training makes a huge difference. And so we can always find training, though, online. There's tons of training for online there's lots of books, there's lots of articles about how to be a good boss. So the other thing is lack of clear purpose. So my purpose for doing these webinars is to give my clients an opportunity to hunker down and say, okay, I want to listen to I've got 15 minutes or 10 minutes, I want to listen to a webinar. And having a clear purpose makes a difference. My purpose is I want to become better at my job. My clear purpose is that I want to go into the next meeting with all of the information for my client that it could possibly want, and then some. What is your clear purpose? I find that leaders who don't have a clear purpose are much more inclined to be under-functioning than leaders who do. The other thing that happens to all of us, but in a leadership position it has stronger effects, is if we resort to the familiar. Now that happens really commonly when a sales rep has been promoted to a sales manager. What happens is that they know how to do the work, and so they will step in and take the role of sales rep, even though their positional role is sales manager. It's much easier to do than to teach. And of course, some people just aren't good teachers, because teaching is a really different competency than doing. But as a leader, it's really important that you be able to stay in the unfamiliar realm of not knowing how to teach and learn how to, than it is to go in and rescue. And so speaking of rescuing, that's what being a savior is. Being a savior means that you position yourself as parental, either paternalistic or maternalistic, and then someone who reports to you is put into the position of being a child. Over and over and over again means that you get stronger, and that person who's reporting to you gets weaker. It's very difficult to say to someone who reports to us, hey, listen, why don't you do some research on that and get back to me on Friday about the 3 possible variations on this theme. And then we'll look at brainstorming on finding the right one. When you know immediately what should be done. But that's being a bad manager or weak manager when you save someone from their own learning angst. Another one, of course, is suffering the disease of having to be right. I was in a meeting a while ago when a client of mine, I was called in because they were looking at a $50 million potential client, and so they wanted to make sure that they approached the client the right way. And my job was to audit their presentation, to ask them questions, and for instance, one question I asked was, who else will be bidding on this opportunity? And one of the people said, oh, I'm pretty sure it's just us. And so I'm pretty sure it's just us is not a good answer. The answer should have been it's XYZ company and then ABC company and then LMN company. And the reason is because if you don't know who else is being called to the table and you're not able to do a competitive analysis and know where you're the best one. And so I noticed as I went through the whole presentation, if I mentioned something like, for instance, oh, that line is all caps and all the rest of the lines are not caps, in the PowerPoint, then the person defended and justified that as well. So that need of always having to be right shows up with defending and justifying. It is a pleasure to work with people who don't have to defend and justify themselves. Whether you like it or not, you cannot achieve a single goal in your life without working with others. Even if you want to be a hermit and go to the Himalayas and sit and meditate all day long, you're going to need someone to bring you food and water. So we have to tap into the good graces of others in order to achieve what we want. And so here's 2 things that will make that easier. Say please and thank you. We learned that in kindergarten. We learned that when we were 1 or 2 or 3. But saying please and thank you makes a big difference to creating and engendering a sense of camaraderie with our peers and with our superiors and with our subordinates. And the other thing, of course, is to be accountable. If you're going to do something, say you're going to do something. And as we said earlier, don't defend and justify. So say please and thank you. Know that your job as a leader is to tap into the good graces of others. When people when there's disagreements, it reacts, there's a whole range of reactions. But if you're high on agreeable and the disagreement feels extremely threatening. Now, if you're an assertive person, disagreements is not so threatening because an assertive person knows that they can just stand their ground and negotiate. If you are an aggressive person, a disagreement can often escalate because an aggressive person has an extreme need to be right. And so if they have a need to be right, they are going to defend and justify that. So a weak leader is someone who is going to have difficulty with an employee or someone. And when they tell that to their boss, they'll position it so that the subordinate is wrong. Because an aggressive person just can't be seen as wrong. Now, so how do we deal with that? Well, if you're high on agreeability, move towards assertive. If you're high on aggressive, modify yourself, moderate yourself, and move to assertive. It's much easier for an aggressive person to move to assertive than it is for an agreeable person to move to assertive. And the reason is that aggressive people are constantly getting in trouble and told, like, don't be such a big mouth. Whereas no one goes to an assertive person, an agreeable person rather, and says, just stop being so nice, will you? No one does that. But whether you're an aggressive person or an agreeable person, disagreements are going to cause an intrinsic response where we feel that we're collapsing, where we need to defend and justify ourselves. And so the idea is to pick up some books, go take some courses, and develop some assertive training. It will make all the difference in the world. Not being consistent means that you can't be trusted. I had a friend in high school, and for some reason she would be moody and mean and nice, and she might have been moody, mean, and nice all in the same day. And so one of these days, at one time, I just said to her, I think it's okay if you're not my friend. I really want you to be happy with your friends, and you're not going to be happy with me when you're moody, mean to me, because I'm going to get mad with you one day, and I'm not going to look good. So I gave her a chance, and sure enough, she drifted away. Now, interestingly enough, she yelled and tormented me from the back of the bus for the rest of that semester, but so what? I didn't care, actually, because I just couldn't stand the inconsistency. When you're inconsistent, you're not seen as a leader. You're actually seen as the opposite, someone who is unsafe. So I want to thank you for being with me today. And you have no idea how happy I am to have been able to present this information to you. I love being an upside-down thinker and looking at hunting down my weaknesses, because I know then I'm going to turn them into a strength. Bye for now.